I never planned to build an island. It started as a small engineering project to clear my head, just a few loads of gravel dropped into the lake. But 14 months later, it had become a fully man-made island with its own dock, solar rigs, and a glass cabin facing sunrise. After months of zoning research, water use filings, and environmental exemptions, it became something more, a legally independent parcel completely outside the HOA's jurisdiction. That's when Brienne, the HOA president across the lake, snapped. First, she called it ugly. Then she claimed it was illegal. Then she sent me a cease demanding I tear it down. Anything to seize control out of jealousy. She had no idea what paperwork I'd secured. So when she pushed harder, I simply proved one thing: it's not under their control. If you're watching this from somewhere dealing with a power-hungry HOA or nosy neighbors, drop a comment below and let me know where you're tuning in from. You're not alone in this fight. I stood on the glass cabin at 6 a.m., coffee in hand, watching the sun break through the thin mist over the lake. The only sound was the soft lap of water against the gravel shore I'd built myself. This was why I built the island, to have absolute silence. 3 years after my divorce, I'd realized I didn't need someone else's approval to find peace. I just needed space that was entirely mine. The cabin was small, just 12 square meters, but it faced east, and every morning the light poured through those windows like liquid gold. I'd spent 14 months turning a dream into something real, something no one could take from me. The divorce had been quiet. No screaming, no throwing plates, just a slow suffocation in a downtown apartment where every wall felt like it was closing in. My ex-wife wanted the city, the noise, the constant hum of other people's lives bleeding into ours. I wanted the opposite. When the papers were signed, I took my share, bought a small house on the edge of Lakewood Estates, and started looking for a way to breathe again. That's when I saw the lake. It stretched out behind the neighborhood like a secret, wide and calm, with enough space that I could disappear into it. I didn't know yet that I'd build an island. I just knew I needed distance. The project started in May of 2023. I rented a small boat, loaded it with gravel from an old quarry, and made trip after trip, dumping stone into the shallow water about 60 meters from my property line. At first, people thought I was fixing erosion. Then they realized I was building something. I used geotextile fabric to hold the base, layered it with compacted clay, and reinforced it with granite slabs I hauled myself. 14 months of weekends, early mornings, and late nights. I installed a steel frame, added tempered glass panels, ran solar power with 4 300-watt panels, and set up a rainwater catchment system with a 500-liter tank. I built a small cedar dock with cleats for my kayak. It cost me just under $48,000. Every cent came from what I'd saved and what I'd walked away from that apartment with. The whole time. I kept meticulous records. I wasn't just building an island. I was documenting it. I filed for a water use permit with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources and got an environmental impact exemption because the structure was under 50 square meters. I contacted the county zoning office and received confirmation in writing. Parcel number LK-2024-0347 is classified as navigable water structure under Minnesota. Statute 103, G.24. 5. Exempt from HOA jurisdiction per state, riparian rights law. I printed that email, saved it in 3 places, and filed it in a folder I labeled Legal Backup. By the time I finished the cabin in July of 2024, I had 37 documents proving every step was legal. I didn't build the island to make a statement. I built it because after years of negotiating every decision with someone else, I needed a place where my choices were final. The island was mine, not ours. Mine. And I'd made sure the law agreed. But that morning, standing there with my coffee, I looked across the lake and saw her, Brienne Hale. She stood on the second-floor balcony of her white 2-story house, the biggest one in the neighborhood, holding binoculars aimed directly at my island. Her face wasn't happy. I didn't know her well yet. I'd only seen her at a distance, always impeccably dressed, always in control. She was the HOA president, had been for 8 years, and from what I'd heard, she ran Lakewood Estates like a personal kingdom. I turned back to my coffee, but something in my chest tightened. The way she was looking at my island felt like a threat. That afternoon, I went to the grocery store. I was in line at the checkout when a woman in a beige cashmere sweater approached me. She was in her early 50s, hair pulled back in a tight bun, and she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Carter Dane. Right, I'm Brienne Hale, HOA president. We haven't officially met. Her voice was polite, almost warm, but there was something underneath it, a coldness. I nodded and said it was nice to meet her. She glanced at my cart, then back at me. Your island. It's quite the project. Did you notify the board before you started building? I kept my voice steady. I checked the regulations. It's on navigable water, outside your jurisdiction. She smiled tighter. We'll need to review that. The HOA has rules about structures visible from common areas. Rule 14C. I'm sure you understand. I didn't respond. She handed me her card, told me to expect an email, and walked away. That night, the email came. It arrived at 9:47 p.m., marked urgent. Subject line notice of potential violation. Lakewood Estates. Rule 14. C. The message was formal, almost legal in tone. It requested that I attend an HOA meeting the following Friday to discuss the offshore structure. Attached was a copy of Rule 14. Any structure visible from common areas must receive Architectural Review Board approval. I read it twice, then opened my laptop and pulled up the county boundary map. The coordinates confirmed what I already knew. I took a screenshot of the GIS map with GPS data and added it to my legal backup folder. Then I looked out the window toward Brienne's house. The light in her second-floor office was still on at 11 p.m. I didn't know what she was planning, but I knew one thing: she wasn't going to let this go. I sat in the dark for a long time, laptop open, staring at the email. I'd done everything right. I had the permits, the exemptions, the written confirmations from the county, but none of that mattered if she decided to weaponize the community against me. And from the way she'd looked at me in that grocery store, from the tone of that email, I knew she was already planning her next move. I looked back out at the lake. My island sat there in the moonlight, quiet and solid, the cabin glass reflecting the stars. For the first time since the divorce, I'd created something that answered to no one but me, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it, not even Brienne Hale. The community center meeting room felt smaller than it should have. 23 homeowners sat on folding chairs, most of them middle-aged, clutching paper coffee cups and whispering to each other like we were waiting for a verdict. I sat in the back row, a manila folder pressed against my chest, trying to look calm. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Someone coughed. I could feel eyes on me, quick glances that darted away when I looked up. Brienne stood at the front near a laptop connected to a projector screen. She wore a gray blazer, hair pulled into a high bun, and she looked like someone who'd never lost an argument in her life. She smiled at the room, warm and practiced, and clicked to the first slide. The image that appeared made my stomach drop. It was my island, photographed from across the lake at an angle that made it look crude and unfinished. The cabin looked blocky. The solar panels seemed haphazard. The dock jutted out like a mistake. She'd chosen the worst possible perspective, probably taken early in the morning when shadows made everything look harsh. The title at the top of the slide was in bold red letters: Unauthorized Structure Violating Community Standards. Brienne let the image sit there for a moment, let the room absorb it. Then she spoke. Her voice was measured, reasonable, the kind of tone that made you feel like disagreeing would be rude. We have a responsibility to protect property values in this community. This structure was built without board approval, and it affects our shared lakefront view. I know Mr. Dane is here tonight, and I appreciate that, but we need to address this as a community. I felt my hands tighten around the folder. A woman in the third row turned to look at me, her expression somewhere between curiosity and disapproval. A man with silver hair in the front nodded slowly, like Brienne had just said something profound. I wanted to stand up right then, to show them the permits, the county letter, the proof that I'd done everything legally. But I waited. I knew if I interrupted now, it would look defensive. So I sat there, teeth clench-eyed, and let her keep talking. She clicked to the next slide. It showed a zoomed-in shot of the cabin with a list of bullet points next to it. Built without architectural review, no HOA approval on record, visible from common lakefront area, potential safety and environmental concerns. Every point was either misleading or outright wrong. But she said them like they were facts, like I was the problem. When she finished, she looked directly at me. "Mr. Dane, would you like to address the board?" Her tone was polite, but there was a challenge in it. I stood, folder in hand, and walked to the front. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. "The island is located on navigable water, which falls under county and state jurisdiction, not the HOA. I have a written confirmation from the county zoning office." I opened the folder and pulled out the printed email, the one that said, "Parcel LK-2024-0347 is exempt from HOA jurisdiction per state riparian rights law." I also pulled out the GIS boundary map with the coordinates clearly marked. I walked over and handed both documents to Brienne. She glanced at them, her jaw tightening, then set them on the table without reading them aloud. She smiled, but it was thin. "Mr. Dane, our regulations apply to any structure visible from common areas. That's Rule 14C. You can't simply ignore that." I took a breath. "With respect, your rule doesn't apply to structures on state-controlled water. Minnesota Statute 103G.245 is very clear. I brought a printed copy if anyone wants to see it." I held up the statute, but no one reached for it. The room was silent. A few people shifted in their seats. A woman in the second row looked at her phone. Brienne didn't miss a beat. She turned back to the projector and clicked to a new slide. This one showed the words, "Community input matters." She spoke directly to the homeowners now, not to me. "I understand Mr. Dane believes he followed procedure, but the fact remains, he didn't consult with any of us before building something that changes the character of our lake. That's a matter of respect. We live in a community. We make decisions together. It was brilliant, in a ruthless way." She'd stopped arguing the law and pivoted to emotion. She was framing me as an outsider, someone who didn't care about the neighborhood, someone selfish, and it was working. I could see it in the faces around me. A man in a flannel shirt crossed his arms and nodded. A couple near the front whispered to each other, looking at me. Brienne held up her hand like she was calling for order. "I'm proposing we take a vote. Should the board pursue a legal review of this structure to determine whether further action is necessary?" She didn't wait long. She asked for a show of hands. 19 people raised their hands. Only 4 didn't. I felt the air leave my lungs. I'd come here with documents, with proof, with the law on my side, and she'd beaten me anyway. Not with facts, with narrative. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. People filed out quietly, avoiding eye contact with me. I packed up my folder and walked toward the exit, feeling the weight of those 19 raised hands like a physical thing. In the parking lot, I headed toward my car, a dusty Subaru that looked out of place next to the row of sleek SUVs. A group of 4 homeowners stood near a black Escalade, talking in low voices. When I walked past, they stopped and watched me. I kept my head down, unlocked my door, and got in. Just as I was about to start the engine, someone tapped on my window. I looked up. It was a blonde woman in her 40s, someone I'd seen around but never spoken to. I rolled down the window. She leaned in slightly, her voice quiet. "Hey, I just wanted to say, I think your island is actually pretty cool, but you should be careful with Brienne. She doesn't like it when people don't fall in line." The woman glanced over her shoulder toward the group by the Escalade, then back at me. 2 years ago, she did something similar to another family. They ended up moving out. She didn't wait for me to respond. She just gave me a tight smile and walked quickly toward her car. I sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, trying to process what she'd said. Then I looked across the parking lot and saw Brienne standing outside the community center, phone pressed to her ear. staring directly at the lake. Even from this distance, I could see the tight set of her shoulders, the way her free hand gripped the railing. She wasn't done, not even close. I drove home slowly, the blonde woman's words echoing in my head. When I pulled into my driveway, I looked out toward the lake. My island sat there under the moonlight, the glass cabin reflecting the stars, peaceful and solid. But for the first time since I'd built it, it didn't feel safe. It felt like a target. I went inside, opened my laptop, and started drafting an email to the county attorney's office. I needed to confirm, in writing, that my island was protected. I needed another layer of documentation, because if tonight had proven anything, it was this: Brienne didn't care about the law. She cared about control. And if I wanted to keep what I'd built, I was going to have to fight for it with more than just permits. I was going to have to fight smart. I spent the next 3 days turning my home office into a war room. 14 files spread across my desk, each one labeled and color-coded. I opened a new spreadsheet and titled it Legal Defense Tracker. Column A, document type. Column B, source. Column C, date received. Column D, legal weight. I wasn't just organizing paperwork. I was building a fortress. Every email, every permit, every confirmation letter got logged, printed in duplicate, and filed in a fireproof safe under my desk. One copy stayed at home. One went to my office downtown. I scanned everything into PDFs, uploaded them to 2 separate cloud accounts, and labeled each file with a reference code: LGL-001, LGL-002. If Brienne wanted a paper trail, I'd give her one so airtight she'd choke on it. The list grew fast. County Zoning Office confirmation email from May of 2023. GIS boundary map from the county surveyor showing parcel coordinates. Water use permit from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources authorizing construction on navigable water. Environmental impact exemption, confirming the island was under 50 square meters and caused no ecological harm. A printed copy of Minnesota Statute 103G.245 with highlighted sections on riparian rights. 218 photos documenting the island's construction from first gravel load to finished cabin. Receipts for every material purchase: gravel, steel, glass, solar panels. Total cost $48,240. I had proof of every dollar, every decision, every legal step, and I made sure each document was backed up in 3 places: safe, office, cloud. On the 4th day, I called Dan Kelly, the real estate attorney who'd handled my divorce. His voice was calm, almost amused when I explained the situation. "Carter, you've got more documentation than most commercial developers. The HOA has no legal ground to touch you. But here's the thing. They don't need legal ground. They can harass you. They can drag this out. They can bleed you dry with legal fees even if they lose. Court costs for something like this could run $15,000 to $25,000. Maybe more." I gripped the phone tighter. "So what do I do?" Dan paused. "Document everything. Every email, every phone call, every interaction. If they escalate into harassment, you'll have grounds to file against them. And stay calm. Let them make the mistakes." I wrote it down. Document everything. Stay legal. Let them make mistakes. 2 days later, the letter arrived. FedEx, signature required. Delivered at 10:15 a.m. The return address was Lakewood Estates HOA. I opened it slowly, already knowing it wouldn't be good. The heading read, "Cease and desist, unauthorized structure." The letter demanded I dismantle the island within 30 days or face fines of $250 per day. Attached was a 2-page document titled Legal Opinion, but there was no lawyer's name on it, no bar number, no official letterhead, just a generic heading, reviewed by Lakewood Legal Advisory. I read it twice, my jaw tightening with each line. The document cited Minnesota Statute 103G.24, missing the final digit. It referenced HOA authority that didn't exist. It claimed jurisdiction the law explicitly denied them. This wasn't a legal opinion. This was intimidation dressed up as one. I called Dan immediately. He listened, then laughed, sharp and bitter. "Carter, this isn't from a real lawyer. No attorney would put their name on something this sloppy. They're hoping you'll panic and comply. Don't." I asked him what I should do. He told me to respond in writing, polite but firm, citing the actual law. So I did. It took me 3 drafts to get the tone right. Professional, respectful, unshakable. "Dear Lakewood Estates HOA Board, thank you for your letter dated October 18th, 2024. I respectfully decline your request. The structure in question is located on navigable water, county parcel, LK-2024-0347, outside HOA jurisdiction per Minnesota, Statute 103G.245. I have obtained all required permits from the County Zoning Office and Minnesota DNR. I am prepared to provide copies upon request. I remain committed to being a respectful neighbor. Sincerely, Carter Dane." I sent it certified mail, kept the tracking number, and filed a copy in LGL-018. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think you're smart, but you're making enemies. People are watching." I stared at the message for a long time, my chest tight. Then I took a screenshot, saved it to a new folder labeled Harassment Evidence, and set my phone down. I walked to the window and looked across the lake. Brienne's house was lit up, the second-floor office window glowing against the dark. I could see a silhouette moving back and forth, pacing. Then the light went out, sudden and complete, like she'd made a decision. I stood there in the silence, my island barely visible under the stars. I'd done everything right. I had the permits, the law, the documentation. But Brienne wasn't fighting with facts. She was fighting with fear. And I was starting to realize that no amount of paperwork could protect me from someone who didn't care about being right. She just cared about winning. I woke up Monday morning to 17 notifications on my phone. Most of them were from a neighborhood group I'd joined months ago but rarely checked. The group had 547 members, nearly everyone in Lakewood Estates and the surrounding areas. I opened the app and my stomach dropped. Brienne had posted at 6:43 a.m., just after sunrise. The post had 3 photos of my island, all taken from angles that made it look unfinished and intrusive. The morning light was harsh, shadows cutting across the cabin in unflattering ways. The solar panels looking like they'd been slapped on without thought. The caption read, "Concerned about this unauthorized structure affecting our lake view and property values. HOA is reviewing legal options." What do you think below it? 127 comments, 89 reactions, most of them angry faces and sad emojis. I scrolled through the comments, my chest tightening with each one. This is an eyesore. How did he get away with this? My home value dropped 3% last quarter. Maybe this is why. He didn't even ask permission. So disrespectful. I heard he's refusing to comply with HOA. A few people tried to defend me. But is it actually illegal? He might have permits. Those comments were immediately buried under replies. "Why are you defending him?" "Do you want property values to drop?" one woman wrote. If he cared about this community, he would have asked first. It didn't matter that I had every legal right to build the island. Brienne had framed the story, and the story was that I was selfish, reckless, a threat to everyone's investment. I wanted to comment, to explain, to show them the county letter and the permits. But I remembered what Dan had said. Don't engage online. They'll twist everything you say. An hour later, another notification. This time, it was a different platform, one for hyperlocal neighborhoods. Brienne had posted there too, but this version had more detail. We've consulted with legal experts who confirm this structure violates community standards. The owner has been notified, but refuses to cooperate. She didn't use my name, but she didn't need to. She attached a photo of my house taken from a public street view, the kind you could pull from any map service. Anyone in the neighborhood would know exactly who she was talking about. The comments came fast. Someone needs to do something. This is exactly why we have HOA rules. What if it collapses? Who's liable then? One person asked if the structure was even safe, implying I'd built something dangerous. Another suggested it might be affecting the lake's ecosystem. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter anymore. Brienne was building a narrative, and it was spreading. That afternoon, I got an email. It went to all 67 homeowners in Lakewood Estates. Subject line update: unauthorized structure issue. The message was carefully worded, formal, almost sympathetic in tone. It summarized the situation, called my island a potential violation, and said the board was conducting a legal review to protect community interests. Then it asked for donations to a legal defense fund, suggested amounts $50, $100, or $200. At the bottom, a link to contribute. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. She was crowdfunding a lawsuit against me. She was turning my neighbors into investors in my destruction. And from the tone of the email, she was making it sound like she was the victim, like the HOA was under attack and needed their help to survive. Within 2 hours, I received 5 emails from neighbors. 3 were cold and formal. We support the HOA. Please comply. One was more neutral, but still pointed. I don't want trouble in the neighborhood. Can't you just take it down? The 5th email was different. It was from the blonde woman who'd warned me in the parking lot. Her name was Rachel. The subject line was simple: don't give up, inside. She wrote, Brienne did this to another family 2 years ago. She made their lives miserable until they sold their house and moved. She's very good at turning people against anyone who doesn't fall in line. I don't have proof of what happened back then, but I saw it. Be careful. I saved the email in a folder labeled support, even though it was the only one in there. I didn't respond to any of the emails right away. Instead, I spent 3 days preparing. I wasn't going to fight Brienne on her terms. I wasn't going to argue in comment sections or send defensive emails to neighbors. I was going to do what I did best: build something airtight. I created a simple website using a free platform. No fancy design, just clean and professional. I titled it Island Project Transparency. On the site, I uploaded every permit, every email from the county, every photo from the construction timeline. I wrote a clear, factual summary of the project. No emotions, no accusations, just the truth, supported by documentation. I included a statement. This structure was built in full compliance with all county and state regulations. It is located on navigable water and is exempt from HOA jurisdiction under Minnesota law. I remain committed to being a good neighbor. The next step was harder. I called the county zoning office and asked for an official letter I could share publicly. The woman on the phone was helpful but cautious. She said she'd need approval from the director, but she thought it was reasonable. 2 days later, the letter arrived by email. To whom it may concern. This letter confirms that the structure on parcel LK-2024-0347 is in full compliance with all county and state regulations. It is exempt from HOA authority under Minnesota statute 103G.245, signed by the county zoning director with an official seal at the bottom. I printed it, scanned it, uploaded it to the website, and filed the original in my safe. Then I drafted a second letter to the HOA. This one was firmer. I attached the county's official letter. I requested that the board cease distributing misleading information about my property, and I added a line I'd debated for an hour before including if defamatory statements continue. I will consult my attorney regarding further action. I sent it certified mail and copied the county attorney's office on the email version. Friday morning, I got another notification. This time it was a photo someone had taken near the lake. A sign had been planted on the public shore about 20 meters from my dock. It was professionally printed on weatherproof material, staked into the ground like it belonged there. The text read, "Notice, private lake access. No watercraft beyond this point. By order of Lakewood Estates, HOA." I walked down to the shore and stood in front of it. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. This was public lake access. The HOA had no authority to restrict it, but the sign created the illusion that they did, that I was violating something just by being here. I took photos from 3 angles, recorded the GPS coordinates, and sent an email to the county sheriff's office, reporting unauthorized signage on public property. Please advise. Then I pulled the sign out of the ground, carried it back to my house, and locked it in my garage. Evidence. That night, I sat on the island, legs dangling over the edge of the dock, watching the sun set behind Brienne's house. The glass of her second-floor office caught the light, flashing orange and gold. I could see her silhouette moving inside, pacing back and forth like she was on the phone. She was escalating. Every move she made was designed to isolate me, to turn the neighborhood against me, to make me feel like the problem. And it was working. I felt it every time I saw a neighbor look away in the grocery store, every time someone walked past my house without waving. But I also knew something she didn't. I had the law, I had the documentation, and now I had a public record that anyone could see. She was fighting with the narrative. I was fighting with facts. And sooner or later, facts win. They have to. Wednesday morning at 6:45 a.m., I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard the engine. It was too early for recreational boats, and the sound was wrong. Too aggressive, like someone was in a hurry. I walked to the window and looked out toward the lake. A white motorboat was cutting through the water, heading straight for my island. 3 men stood on deck, all wearing high-visibility orange vests. One held a DSLR camera with a telephoto lens. Another gripped a clipboard. The third was steering. I didn't recognize any of them, but I recognized the logo on their vests. Lakewood Services, a contractor company Brienne had used before for community landscaping. My chest tightened. I grabbed my phone, shoved my feet into boots, and ran. By the time I reached the shore and climbed into my kayak, they were already there. The motorboat idled beside my dock, engine rumbling. The 3 men had stepped onto the island and were walking around the cabin, taking photos from every angle. One of them was peering through the glass walls, shading his eyes with his hand. The man with the clipboard was making notes, his pen moving fast. I paddled harder, my shoulders burning. When I got close enough, I shouted over the engine noise. "Hey, what are you doing?" The man with the clipboard looked up, startled. "We're from the HOA. We were asked to conduct a structural assessment." I pulled the kayak up onto the gravel and stood, blocking the path between them and the cabin. "This is private property. Who gave you permission to be here?" The man shifted his weight, glancing at the one with the camera. "Mrs. Hale. She said the structure falls under HOA review." I felt anger flash hot in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. "I'm recording this. You're trespassing on private property without a court order. I need you to leave. Now." The photographer lowered his camera, uncertain. The man with the clipboard frowned. "Look, we're just doing our job. We were told this was approved." "It's not approved," I said, my voice harder now. "And if you don't leave immediately, I'm calling the sheriff." The 3 men exchanged glances. The one steering the boat called out, asking if they should go. The man with the clipboard hesitated, then nodded. We'll report back to Mrs. Hale." They climbed back onto the motorboat, started the engine, and pulled away. I stood there, phone still recording, watching them disappear across the lake. My hands were shaking. I sat down on the edge of the dock, trying to steady my breathing. This wasn't an email. This wasn't a sign. This was a physical violation of my space, my property, the one place I'd built to be safe. I looked down at my phone. The video was clear. Timestamp, GPS coordinates embedded. 3 men walking onto my island without permission. I saved it immediately, then opened my laptop inside the cabin. The security camera I'd installed weeks ago, a small solar-powered unit mounted above the door, had captured everything. I downloaded the footage. The men stepping off the boat, the photographer shooting through the cabin windows, the clipboard guy making notes, me arriving and confronting them. It was all there, crisp and undeniable. I labeled the files evidence-trespassing-October 26 and uploaded them to 3 separate cloud accounts. Then I called the county sheriff's office. The dispatcher listened as I explained what had happened, gave her my address and parcel number, and offered to send the video. She said a deputy would come by that afternoon to take a formal statement. I thanked her and hung up, then sat in the quiet cabin for a long time, staring out at the lake. Brienne had crossed a line. She wasn't just attacking my reputation anymore. She was sending people onto my property, treating it like it was hers to inspect, to control, to judge. I thought about the blonde woman's warning, about the family 2 years ago who'd been pushed out. I thought about the 19 hands raised in that meeting, the donation fund, the coordinated posts. Brienne wasn't going to stop. She was going to keep escalating until I either gave up or broke. At 3:30 p.m., Deputy Miller arrived. He was in his late 40s, calm and professional, with a notebook and a body camera clipped to his uniform. I walked him through everything, showed him the video on my phone, the security camera footage on my laptop, the photos of footprints still visible in the gravel where the men had walked. He took notes, asked clarifying questions, and requested I email him copies of all the footage. Then he asked if I wanted to press charges. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to make this as official and serious as possible. But another part of me knew that pressing charges might escalate things even further, might give Brienne ammunition to paint me as vindictive. I told him I wanted it documented, that I wanted a formal incident report, but I'd decide about charges later. He nodded, said that was reasonable, and told me the report would be filed within 48 hours. After he left, I sat on the cabin steps and tried to think clearly. Brienne had made a mistake. She'd sent people onto my property without legal authority, and now I had proof. I had video, timestamps, witnesses. I had a deputy's formal acknowledgement, but I also knew she wasn't going to see it that way. She was going to see it as me escalating, as me being difficult, as me refusing to cooperate. I needed to confront her, not publicly, not through lawyers yet. I needed her to understand that I wasn't going to be intimidated. At 4 p.m., I got in my car and drove to her house. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear. I parked on the street, walked up the stone path, and rang the doorbell. Brienne answered after a few seconds. She looked surprised, then guarded. Her expression shifted quickly into something polite but cold. "Carter, I wasn't expecting you." I kept my voice calm, controlled. "This morning you sent 3 men onto my island without permission. That's illegal. It's called trespassing, and I've reported it to the sheriff." Her face tightened, but she stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind her. "We have a right to inspect structures that affect community standards." "No, you don't," I said, "not without a court order. And you know that. I've filed a report with the county sheriff. If you or anyone you send steps onto my property again without legal authorization, I will pursue charges. Do you understand?" Brienne's jaw clenched. She stepped closer, lowering her voice, and for the first time I saw something crack in her composure. "You don't understand how this works. I've spent 8 years building this community. I've protected property values. I've maintained standards. You can't just show up and do whatever you want because you have some paperwork. People here trust me. They depend on me, and I will make sure you're not welcome here anymore." I pulled out my phone, held it up so she could see the recording icon. "I've been recording this conversation. Minnesota is a one-party consent state. What you just said, admitting you're using the HOA for personal retaliation, that's on record now." Her face went pale. She stared at the phone, then at me, her mouth opening, but no words coming out. I put the phone back in my pocket. I didn't want this. "Brienne, I just wanted to be left alone. But you've pushed this too far. You sent people onto my property. You've defamed me to the neighborhood. You've weaponized the HOA. And now it's documented. If you want to keep going, I'll defend myself with every legal tool I have. But if you're smart, you'll stop." She didn't say anything. She just stood there, hands trembling slightly at her sides. I turned and walked back to my car. I didn't look back. When I reached the end of her driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror. She was still standing on the porch, motionless, staring after me. I drove home, my pulse still racing, and parked in my driveway. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lake. My island sat there, quiet and solid, the cabin glass catching the last light of the day. That night, I received an email from the HOA. Subject line, emergency board meeting. Friday, 7 p.m. Topic, legal action against a non-compliant property owner. Attendance is mandatory for all board members. I read it twice, then closed the laptop. The meeting wasn't for discussion. It was for a final decision. Brienne was preparing to go all in, to use the full weight of the HOA to try to crush me. But she didn't know what I knew. She didn't know I had video of her contractors trespassing. She didn't know I had a recording of her admitting to retaliation. She didn't know that every move she'd made had been documented, time-stamped, and backed up in triplicate. I walked out to the island one last time that night, sat on the dock, and watched the stars come out. I felt something shift inside me. Not fear, not anger. Certainty. Brienne had drawn the line. And on Friday night, I was going to cross it. Thursday night, I turned my home office into a command center. Every document I'd collected over the past months was spread across the desk in organized stacks. I printed 3 copies of everything one for me, one for the county attorney's office I'd already emailed, and one to distribute at the meeting if necessary. I prepared a USB drive with the trespassing video, the recording of my conversation with Brienne, and screenshots of every defamatory post she'd made. Then I built a presentation. 12 slides, no fancy graphics, no emotional appeals. Just facts, timestamps, and evidence. I kept it simple because I didn't need to convince anyone with rhetoric. I needed to show them the truth. Dan called at 8 p.m. His voice was cautious, almost worried. "Carter, are you sure about this? Once you do this publicly, there's no walking it back. If you expose her like this, she'll be humiliated. She might escalate in ways you can't predict." I understood his concern, but I also knew I didn't have a choice anymore. "She's already escalated. Dan, she sent people onto my property. She admitted on tape that she's using the HOA to retaliate against me personally. If I don't stop her now, she'll do this to someone else." There was a long pause. Then Dan sighed. "All right. Just remember, stay calm. Let the evidence do the work. Don't let her bait you into losing your temper." I promised him I wouldn't, thanked him, and hung up. Then I went over the presentation one more time, refining the order, tightening the language. By midnight, I was ready. Friday at 7 p.m. I walked into the community center meeting room. It was packed. 41 people this time, nearly double the first meeting. Word had spread that something big was happening, and people wanted to see it. I recognized most of the faces, neighbors I'd waved to in passing, people who'd voted against me before, a few who'd sent those cold emails, and Rachel, the blonde woman who'd warned me, sitting near the middle with her arms crossed. She gave me a small nod. Brienne sat at the head table with 4 other board members. She wore a black blazer, her hair pulled back tight, and her expression was hard, controlled. She looked like someone preparing for battle. I took a seat in the middle row, right next to Rachel, and set my laptop bag on the floor. Brienne called the meeting to order. Her voice was steady, practiced, like she'd rehearsed this. "Thank you all for coming. Tonight we're voting on whether to authorize legal action against Mr. Carter Dane for violations of community standards." She opened her laptop, and a projector screen lit up behind her. The first slide showed my island again, the same unflattering angle from before. The title read, "Unapproved Structure, Continued Non-Compliance." She moved to the next slide. It was a list of supposed violations. Failed to seek architectural approval. Refused multiple requests to comply. Trespassed on community lake access. Every single item was either misleading or outright false. But she delivered them like established facts. A few people in the audience nodded. Some took notes. Brienne clicked to another slide showing dollar amounts. "We've already spent $4,200 from the HOA Reserve Fund consulting legal counsel. If Mr. Dane continues to refuse cooperation, that number will grow significantly." I felt my pulse quicken, but I kept my face neutral. Brienne looked directly at me. "Before we vote, I'd like to give Mr. Dane an opportunity to address the board." She said it with false generosity, like she was offering me mercy. I stood, picked up my laptop, and walked to the front. I didn't look at Brienne. I looked at the community. "Thank you. I'm going to need more than 5 minutes, but I promise everything I say will be backed by evidence." I connected my laptop to the projector. Brienne's slides disappeared, replaced by mine. The first one was simple, just a title, the facts. Below it, one line, Everything you're about to see is documented and verifiable. I clicked to the next slide. It showed a timeline of my island's construction, month by month, with photos embedded at each stage. I started in May of 2023. This is a time lapse of the construction process. 14 months of work, all documented. Every step was legal. I played a 90-second video showing the progression from the first gravel load to the finished cabin. The room was silent. I moved to the next slide. Permits and approvals. I displayed the email from the county zoning office, the one confirming my parcel was outside HOA jurisdiction. I read the key line aloud. Parcel LK-2024-0347 is exempt from HOA authority under Minnesota. Statute 103G.245. I handed out printed copies to the first row and asked them to pass them back. This isn't my opinion. This is state law. I clicked forward. Water use permit from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. Environmental impact exemption. Then I showed the statute itself, the actual legal text, with the relevant section highlighted. According to Minnesota law, HOA organizations cannot regulate structures on navigable water. This isn't ambiguous. It's clear. A man in the third row leaned forward, reading the handout. A woman whispered to her husband. I moved to the next slide, HOA's false claims. I listed each accusation Brienne had made, then showed why it was wrong. She said I failed to seek approval. But the HOA has no authority to require approval for this structure. She said I refused to comply. But I'm not legally required to comply. She said I trespassed on community lake access. But I've never done that. In fact, the opposite happened. I clicked to the next slide. It was a still frame from the security camera footage. 3 men are standing on my island. Wednesday, October 26th, 6:52 a.m. 3 contractors hired by Mrs. Hale entered my property without permission. This is trespassing. I played the video, 45 seconds of clear footage showing the men stepping onto the island, photographing the cabin, and me arriving to ask them to leave. I filed a formal report with the county sheriff's office. Deputy Miller confirmed this is a trespassing violation. The room erupted in whispers. Someone in the back said, I didn't know about that. A board member, a silver-haired man named Greg, leaned over to Brienne and said something I couldn't hear. Her face was pale, her jaw tight. I moved to the next slide. Harassment and intimidation. I showed a screenshot of the threatening text message. You're making enemies. People are watching. I displayed screenshots of Brienne's posts, the ones with manipulated photos and misleading captions, designed to turn the community against me. I showed the cease and desist letter with the fake legal opinion, the one that cited the wrong statute and had no lawyer's signature. Then I played the audio. My voice, then Brienne's, was recorded on her front porch. You don't understand how this works. Carter, I've spent 8 years building this community. People here trust me. They depend on me. And I will make sure you're not welcome here anymore. The room went silent. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Rachel sat up straighter, her expression hard. I stopped the recording and faced the audience. That's an admission of using the HOA for personal retaliation. That's abuse of authority. And it's all documented. I clicked on the final slide. My request. 3 bullet points. 1. The HOA formally withdraws all claims regarding my property. 2. Mrs. Hale issues a public apology for harassment and defamation. 3. The board guarantees no retaliatory action moving forward. If these conditions aren't met, I will file a civil lawsuit against Mrs. Hale personally and the HOA board for harassment, defamation, and trespassing. I've already consulted with an attorney. The case is ready. I looked at Brienne. She was staring at the table, her hands gripping the edge so hard her knuckles were white. Greg, the board member, stood up. His voice was shaky. Brienne, I didn't know about the trespassing. You told us it was an approved inspection. Brienne's head snapped up. It was necessary. We needed to assess the structure. Greg shook his head. But Carter's right. We don't have jurisdiction. If he files a lawsuit, the HOA could lose tens of thousands of dollars. We can't afford that. Another board member, a woman named Susan, spoke up. "Carter, do you have the sheriff's report?" I pulled out a printed copy of the incident report and handed it to her. She read it, then passed it to Greg. "This is real. Brienne, did you authorize those contractors?" Brienne didn't answer. She just sat there, frozen. The room was buzzing now, people talking over each other, asking questions. Greg banged his hand on the table for quiet. "We need to vote on whether to proceed with legal action against Carter. But before we do, I want everyone to understand. If we vote yes, we're exposing the HOA to a countersuit that could bankrupt us." Brienne finally spoke, her voice strained. "We need to take a stand. If we let him get away with this, everyone will think they can ignore the rules." But no one was listening to her anymore. Greg called for the vote. "All in favor of authorizing legal action against Mr. Dane, raise your hand." Not a single hand went up. The room was still. Brienne looked around, her face crumbling. You're just going to let him win?" Rachel stood up from her seat. "Brienne, he didn't break any rules. You did. You sent people onto his property. You lied to us about legal opinions. You used HOA money for personal grudges. That's the problem here." A few people murmured agreement. Brienne grabbed her purse, stood abruptly, and walked out. The door slammed behind her. No one followed. Greg turned to me, his expression apologetic. "Carter, I'm sorry. I didn't know the full extent of what was happening. The board will meet next week to discuss leadership changes, and we'll make sure you receive a formal apology." I nodded, exhausted. "Thank you. I just want to be left alone." He promised me they would, and the meeting dissolved. People came up to me as I packed my laptop. Some apologized. Some thanked me for standing up. Rachel squeezed my shoulder. "You did the right thing." She had it coming. I walked out into the parking lot, the cool night air hitting my face. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt drained. But when I looked out toward the lake, toward my island sitting there under the stars, I felt something else too, relief. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. Saturday morning, I woke up to silence, not the kind I'd been chasing when I built the island, but the kind that comes after a storm. I made coffee, checked my phone, and saw 17 new notifications. Most of them were from the neighborhood group. I opened it cautiously, expecting more anger, more accusations. Instead, what I found was different. Rachel had posted at 7:23 a.m. Her message was simple but powerful. "I was at the meeting last night. We owe Carter an apology. Brienne lied to us. She manipulated the facts and used our trust to harass someone who did nothing wrong." Below it, 143 reactions, 67 comments, almost all of them supportive. I scrolled through, my chest loosening with each line. "I can't believe she sent people onto his property. That's illegal. I voted to pursue legal action last time. I was wrong. I'm sorry." Carter, Greg, the board member, had commented too. "I'm calling for an emergency board vote to review leadership. This has gone too far." Someone else wrote, "How much HOA money did she waste on this?" "We deserve answers." A few people defended Brienne, saying she was just trying to protect property values. But those comments were buried under responses. Property values don't justify breaking the law. She abused her authority. I set my phone down and stared out the window toward the lake. The narrative had flipped, not because I'd argued louder or fought dirtier, but because I'd shown the truth. And the truth was undeniable. By noon, I'd received 8 emails directly from neighbors. 3 were formal apologies. "I'm sorry for not listening to your side earlier. I should have asked questions before jumping to conclusions." 2 were more personal. One man wrote, "I was one of the 19 who voted against you. I was wrong. Thank you for standing up to her." Another woman said, "My husband and I supported the legal fund. We want to know how to get our money back. Can the board refund us?" The other 3 emails were from people asking questions about the island, about the permits, about how I'd navigated the bureaucracy. They weren't hostile. They were curious. One couple even asked if they could visit the island someday. I responded to each email politely, keeping my tone neutral, professional. I wasn't interested in gloating. I just wanted it over. Tuesday evening, Greg called me. His voice was serious, almost somber. "Carter, the board met this afternoon. We reviewed everything that happened, the expenditures, the timeline, the actions Brienne took without full board approval. We also reviewed the incident report from the sheriff and the recording you played at the meeting." He paused, and I heard papers rustling. "We've asked Brienne to resign as HOA president. She refused at first, but when we explained that we'd vote to remove her if necessary, she agreed. She submitted her resignation this morning, effective immediately." I sat back in my chair, processing the words. I hadn't expected it to happen this fast. Greg continued. "We're also reviewing the $4,200 she spent. It turns out she didn't use it for legal consultation. She paid Lakewood Services to do that inspection without board approval. That's misuse of funds. We'll be conducting a full audit." I asked him what happened next. Greg sighed. "We're going to issue a formal apology to you, in writing, and we're implementing new policies. Mandatory legal review before any enforcement action, transparent reporting of all expenditures, and term limits for board positions. 3 consecutive terms maximum. We can't let this happen again." I thanked him and told him I appreciated it. Before he hung up, he said something that surprised me. "Carter, I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. Brienne was very good at controlling the narrative, but you stood up when most people would have just given up. That takes guts." After the call ended, I sat there in the quiet, feeling something strange. Not triumph, not vindication, just exhaustion, and maybe relief. Thursday afternoon, I got a call from Deputy Miller at the county sheriff's office. "Mr. Dane, I wanted to update you. We've completed our investigation into the trespassing incident. We interviewed the 3 contractors. They confirmed that Mrs. Hale hired them and instructed them to inspect your island. They said she told them it was approved by the county. It wasn't. Based on the evidence, including your video and their statements, Mrs. Hale will be issued a citation for trespassing by proxy. The fine is $385. If you want to pursue a civil case, you have sufficient grounds." I told him I didn't want to sue. I just wanted to make sure it didn't happen again. He said the citation would be mailed to Brienne within 10 days, and the incident would remain on record. That was enough for me. That evening, Rachel texted me. She'd heard through the neighborhood that Brienne had put her house up for sale. I drove past later, just to see. And sure enough, there was a sign in the front yard, "For sale." The asking price was $1.2 million, about 8% below market value. She wanted out fast. Rachel also told me that Brienne had moved temporarily to an apartment in Minneapolis, that she wasn't answering calls from former friends, that the people who'd once supported her were now distancing themselves. Part of me felt bad for her, not because I thought she was right, but because watching someone's life collapse, even someone who'd tried to destroy mine, wasn't satisfying. It was just test. Friday morning, I received an official letter from the HOA board. It was signed by Greg and the other 3 board members. The letter was formal, typed on official letterhead. "Dear Mr. Dane, on behalf of the Lakewood Estates HOA board, we sincerely apologize for the wrongful actions taken against you over the past months. We acknowledge that your island structure is fully compliant with all county and state regulations and is not subject to HOA jurisdiction. We apologize for the harassment, the trespassing incident, and the public misrepresentation you endured. These actions do not reflect the values of our community. We have implemented new governance policies to prevent abuse of authority in the future, including mandatory legal review before enforcement, transparent expenditure reporting, and term limits for board members. We hope you will continue to be a valued member of our community. Sincerely, Lakewood Estates HOA Board." I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in my legal backup folder. Not because I thought I'd need it again, but because it represented something. Proof that standing up, even when it's hard, even when you're outnumbered, can lead to change. I walked out to the lake that evening, stood on the shore, and looked across at Brienne's house. Every light was off. The for sale sign glowed under the street lamp. I thought about everything that had happened. The emails, the meetings, the trespassing, the confrontation. I thought about how close I'd come to just giving up, to tearing down the island and walking away. And I thought about what Dan had told me. Let them make the mistakes. I had. And they did. I turned back toward my island, the cabin glass catching the last rays of sunlight, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the kind you escape to, the kind you fight for, and win. 2 weeks later, I did something I hadn't planned. I invited people to the island. Not everyone, just a small group. 12 neighbors who'd either supported me or apologized afterward. Rachel and her husband, Greg and his wife, Susan, a few others who'd reached out with genuine remorse. I set up a small grill on the shore near the dock, bought burgers and hot dogs, made lemonade, and prepared my kayak to ferry people out 2 at a time. It wasn't about showing off. It was about letting them see what I'd actually built, what all of this had been about. And maybe, in some small way, it was about healing. Rachel arrived first, carrying a bowl of potato salad. She stood on the shore and looked out at the island, shading her eyes from the afternoon sun. "Carter, I've been watching you build this for over a year, and I've never seen it up close. Can I go first?" I smiled and helped her into the kayak. We paddled out together, the water calm and glassy. When we reached the dock, she stepped onto the gravel carefully, looking around like she was entering a secret world. The cabin, the solar panels, the small wooden bench I'd added facing east. She walked up the steps to the glass cabin and peered inside. "This is beautiful. I mean it. This is really special." I thanked her, and she turned back to me. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I should have. I told her it was okay, that I understood how hard it was to go against someone like Brienne." Over the next hour, I ferried everyone out in small groups. Greg came with his wife. He stood on the dock and looked back toward the shore, toward Brienne's house, with its for sale sign still planted in the yard. That whole situation got so out of hand. I didn't realize how much control she had until you challenged it. His wife touched his arm gently. "We're grateful you did. Otherwise, who knows what she would have done next." Susan brought her 2 kids, a boy and a girl, maybe 8 and 10 years old. The little girl looked out over the water and asked if I'd built the whole island myself. I told her I had, over 14 months. She looked at her mom. "Can we build one?" Susan laughed. "Probably not, honey. But maybe we can visit this one again." I told her they were welcome any time, toward the end of the afternoon, when most people had rotated through. I stood on the shore with Rachel. She handed me a beer from the cooler and clinked her bottle against mine. "You know what's funny? I think this whole mess made the neighborhood better. People are actually paying attention now, asking questions. The new board policies, the term limits, the transparency, that's all because of you." I wasn't sure I agreed, but I appreciated the sentiment. A man I didn't know well, someone who'd voted against me in that first meeting, walked over and extended his hand. "I owe you an apology. I didn't take the time to understand the situation. I just listened to Brienne because she seemed confident. That was lazy of me." I shook his hand and told him I didn't hold it against him. "We're good." As the sun started to set, people began packing up. They thanked me, shook my hand, hugged me. A few asked if I'd be interested in joining the new HOA board. I politely declined. I'd had enough of governance battles. I just wanted to live quietly, build things, and be left alone. When the last person left, I sat on the dock with my legs dangling over the edge, watching the sky turn orange and pink. The lake was still, the only sound the occasional lap of water against the gravel. I thought about everything that had happened, the emails, the meetings, the trespassing, the confrontation. And I realized something. This wasn't just about the island. It was about refusing to be erased, refusing to let someone else decide what I deserved. A month later, I got an email from the county attorney's office. "Mr. Dane, thank you for your cooperation during our review of the HOA matter. We've determined no further action is needed on your part. However, based on your documentation, we're opening a review of HOA governance practices at Lakewood Estates to ensure compliance with state regulations moving forward. Your case has been cited as an example in our updated guidelines for homeowner associations. Thank you for your diligence. I read the email 3 times, then saved it in my archive. It wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a precedent. Something that could protect other people from going through what I had. April came. 6 months after it all began. The island had settled into the landscape. No longer something strange or controversial, just part of the lake. I'd added a small bench outside the cabin and planted 3 potted birch trees that I watered every other day. I'd logged 12 different bird species visiting the island. Some mornings, I'd sit there with coffee and a notebook, sketching ideas for future projects. Not big things, just small improvements. A rain garden, a better dock, maybe a small greenhouse. Brienne's house had been sold in March. A young couple with a toddler moved in. I saw them once, walking along the shore, the kid chasing a dog. The wife looked over at my island, smiled, and waved. I waved back. One Saturday morning, I sat on the cabin steps and opened my laptop. I started writing something I'd been thinking about for weeks. Not a legal document, not a defense, just a reflection. A blog post titled, "The Island Project," a story of building, defending, and belonging. I wrote, I built this island to find peace. I defended it to protect my right to that peace. And now I'm sharing it, not as a symbol of defiance, but as a reminder that sometimes the things we create with our own hands are worth fighting for. Not with violence, not with revenge, but with patience, evidence, and the law. I published it, closed the laptop, and looked out over the water. The sun was rising, the glass cabin glowing gold. For the first time in years, I felt like I'd finally built something that couldn't be taken away. Not the island, the certainty that I could stand up for myself and win. That was the real sanctuary. If this story hit home, you're not alone. Thousands of people face power-hungry HOAs, toxic neighbors, and systems built to intimidate. But standing up the right way changes everything. Hit subscribe to Karma Fence for more real stories of people who refuse to back down and won with nothing but patience, proof, and the law. Drop a comment. Which part made you want to cheer? Let's build a community that fights back.